Good evening, YouTube. Sorabel here. I decided to make a video today before the ban list drop to talk about my feelings on certain cards and like the format in general. I think this format is probably one of the better ones we've had in a long time. I don't think it's perfect by far. There are cards that I think are extremely unfair right now. For how low commitment they are. True King of all calamities is one of them. Cyber Angel Benten's another one. The advantage it generates is kind of insane. This is probably my most hated card this format. But I don't think even then, I don't think it should be banned. There's still some things you could do to play around it. But it's on this list because I do want to talk about Zeus. So, without further ado, we should begin from the beginning. Okay. So the first card on my list I want to talk about is Elixir of Scarlet Sanguine. So Scarlet Sanguine allows Eldritch to essentially endlessly grind their trap cards. It gives them a free body if Eldritch is already on the field, which while it's strong in zombie decks, it's also technically incredibly powerful in any variant of the deck that's still splashing Eldritch. Because you can special summon something like an Ash Blossom and then make access code talker and push for game that way. There's just a lot this card enables the deck to do, and then you can banish it to set a Conquistador or a Haquero, both of which are incredibly potent interruptions. So my problem with Eldritch is that I don't think the deck is inherently unfair. I think it's a situation where it is like the only control deck in the format that sees consistent success. You should never find yourself in a position where you have a majority of decks of the same type. So for example, control decks would be like Alter Guys, Guru, Sky Striker, for example, and Eldritch is just so much superior than those options, right? You're almost at a disadvantage if you're playing a control deck if you choose not to play this engine, because it just grinds so well, so much better than all the other ones. So I think Elixir or Scarlet Sanguine should be put to 1. I don't think this card is the worst thing in the format, but I do think Eldritch as an engine is a bit too strong. So I would like Sanguine to be put to 1. I don't think anything else in the Eldritch deck is worth hitting. Some people want Eldland hit. I don't think Eldland needs to be hit. I like it as a consistency tool, and it allows the deck to be a lot more splashable, which supports other weaker archetypes. I just don't think the grind game should be as strong as it is. So without that, let's just limit Sanguine and move on. Cyber Angel Benten. I don't have a lot of problems with Drytron. I actually don't think Drytron is too bad. My only problem with Drytron is that this card has a glaring not hard once per turn on it. So if this card were limited, it would reduce their likeliness of seeing this card, on top of just making the card a lot easier to remove from their plays. A well-timed DD Crow could shut down the whole thing. So I would like to see Benten go. See, Drytron's a little weird because obviously we have Allied Justice Psycho Reader in the format, but Psycho Reader only really works on Drytron. It has applications against Eldritch too, but like Drytron is really what that card is for, and I hate the idea of there being a deck that requires a unique side deck tool, because it means that decks are less likely to be kitted for it out the gate. So Drytron ends up getting away with a lot of free game ones because of how much advantage this card generates, and how likely decks aren't going to be able to have answers for it in the main. Good combo decks, or decks that apply ridiculous pressure, will be able to main DD Crow, but slower decks just can't play that. Not DD Crow, Droll and Lockbird, but slower decks cannot play that card. Slower decks have to rely on Psycho Reader, and they're likely not going to main it. So a limit to Cyber Angel Benten, just so that Drytron's consistency isn't so high, but the deck is still fundamentally playable, is what I'd like to see. Especially since in Lightning Overdrive they're due for a new Exceed monster that will spice up the strategy. I really would like to see the era of Ben 10 Go Burr go away before that deck like overstays its welcome, because nobody wants that. So a limit to Ben 10 I would appreciate. Miscellaneousaurus, not much to say here. I don't like this card. I think this card is one of the most ignorant cards ever in the game. It gives dinosaurs a free pass for interruption. It's a starter on its own. I don't think any other deck in existence has a card that allows them to play the game uninterrupted while starting their combo, and protecting like the entire investment. I think this card should have never been printed, but since it's here, I would just put it at 1, and let's pretend Fossil Dig has a heart once per turn on it too, because this card is just incredibly searchable. You essentially have 9 copies of it. The 3 that you have, the 3 that you start with, Ovi and then Fossil Dig. Though the 3 using Ovi for this card isn't entirely relevant, it's the fact that you can just search it with Fossil Dig or just hard draw it, and the Fossil Dig isn't even a brick. You would just search Ovi. Like, it's too consistent. And a part of my problem with dinosaurs, and I'll get into what we're talking about with Pendulum, is that dinosaurs, it's a type that can't have any archetypes because the type's generic support is so strong, right? Like, you can't print a how do I put it? You can't print a dinosaur archetype and make it any good while this card is legal. It just wouldn't work, because then you'd have a more consistent, well-crafted archetype. Like, imagine, how could I put this? Imagine something like, I'm not going to use something like Zoo or like a top tier deck. Let's say something like Cyber Dragon, right? Cyber Dragon's like tier 2, tier 3-ish deck, and it has a lot of strong tools to its disposal, a lot of it based around its archetype, but it can also abuse some of the machines, generic machine support, like machine duplication, for example. Miscellaneousaurus, in a imagine if a deck like Cyber Dragon got a Miscellaneousaurus, right? Suddenly their plays become a lot safer, and then you stack the fact that this card also starts their combos. You end up in a situation where the deck compels itself into genuine ignorance, right? It doesn't have to play fair. And while it's true, you can make the argument that the best decks are always doing something unfair, the ban list is designed to cut that out, right? And as we see, Dinosaur has been a very relevant pick for a long time. Though it's never truly been the best deck in the format, I think it's long overstayed its welcome. And I believe Miscellaneousaurus to 1 would be perfectly fine. If we were to get back, side note, a card I would like to see come back, Denglong, the first of the Yangzing, I would like Miscellaneousaurus banned. I would actually, that'd be a fine trade for me. Zenglong to return, Miscellaneousaurus to 0. And we can move on from there. But dinos aren't like the biggest problem. I just don't really like this card. I think it's incredibly degenerate. So moving on. Now to talk about... I'll hold off on dragons. We'll come back to dragons because, as you can see, there's a lot to talk about regarding dragons. So let's move down to the extra deck. True King of all calamities. I'm not even going to spend too much time on it. Please just ban this card. It's degenerate. It's unfun. It does not promote interaction. Moving on. Same thing for Utopic Zexal, only there's a little bit more to talk about with this card. This card technically isn't a part of anything super good right now. Numeron as an engine is garbage. It's something for decks with no coherent game plan to take advantage of, stuff like Guru Control and like Trickstar, decks that don't really work for one reason or another. This gives them a sort of goal to reach to. So the card isn't technically terrible. My problem with this card is what Lightning Overdrive does for it, because it gives it the support it does not need, right? With the release of ZS, I believe it's Arm Sage. Yes, this card right here, what went from an incredibly high risk engine with heavy restrictions now becomes as simple as play your level 4. Because let's read this card, ZS Ascend Sage. If you control no cards, you can special summon this card from your hand. A Utopia Exceeds monster that was summoned using this card on the field as material gains the following effect: add 1 rank up normal spell. Right. This card just says discard a rank up magic and turn it. Discard a rank up normal spell, then use a Utopia monster you control as exceed material. So it doesn't matter what you search. You just as long as you can get 2 level 4s, of which this is one, and it's a free special summon. Every end board could end with this guy. What's annoying too is that if you play a dedicated engine to it with ZS Arm Sage, who has an additional effect, add 1 ZW monster from your deck to your hand, you could use these two together, make a Utopia, then activate the Utopia's effect to search the rank up magic spell first, and chain block it with the effect of Arm Sage second. This means your opponent actually just has to have Effect Veiler or Infinite Impermanence, or I guess Forbidden Droplet on the Zexal, or a Gamma would work to stop the Zexal specifically. But the fact of the matter is, for his low cost of 2 level 4 monsters, I get Utopic Zexal. It's nearing Dragoon's levels of Degenerate, and we'll get to him. So I don't think this card should be around for the release of Lightning Vortex or Lightning Override. I think this card does break it. I don't think it's going to be fair in any deck that literally just has a level 4 to summon. Dragon Link can abuse this. Just special summon it, and at any point in your combo where you make a level 4, you can throw a Zexal on there to not necessarily insulate your combo, but reduce the amount of... It's basically the simplest way to add True King of all Calamities to your end board, right? Like you summon this, do Guard Dragon plays, then you link these two off into spheres, and you use the level 4 you summoned off of Pisty with this guy to make Utopia, and then the Utopia becomes Exile. Like the possibilities are endless for how ridiculous this card is going to be if it's still legal when this arrives. And the only brick you have to play is 1 rank up magic. And what's worse is that it's incredibly searchable. It's a warrior, so Reinforcements of the Army searches it. And the card comes with its own searcher that also has the ability to put bricks back into your deck. So I don't think we should have this engine ever take off. I think if we're getting rid of Calamities now, I think his little brother or his big brother should go too. This card has a potential to be way worse and much more splashable, and Calamities is already dominating the format. So with that being said, let's discuss Divine Arsenal. Divine Arsenal isn't a terribly well, okay, Zeus is broken. Zeus is an insanely unfair card. However, its restrictions allow it to be much more tolerable than, say, Zexal or Calamities. It has that same kind of pressure where once it touches the board, playing the game becomes difficult because whatever you commit can just be taken from you right away. I think the only real problem I have with Zeus is that it's at 3. I think this is the perfect example of a extra deck monster that should be at 1, because playing around 1 Zeus requires a lot of extension and like a lot of board building potential that this card inherently punishes, right? Like Zeus doesn't come down turn 1 to stop your opponent who has a full hand of cards from committing to the board. Zeus comes down to break boards. So if you're breaking a board with this card, preventing them from building up something else is already enough pressure in itself. The fact that you can normal summon another Zoo and put up a second one just by attacking is a huge problem in design. And like we saw Evil Swarm Exciton Knight become banned years ago, I think this is actually the second coming of that card. I think Divine Arsenal should be banned. Not banned, limited to 1 forever. I don't think this card should ever be at a number higher than 1. It should be an option, but it should not be the only option. The fact that the card even has build-in, rebuildability for itself, as soon as a card is destroyed, it can equip from your deck or extra deck or your hand just to build back its sending effect. is strong enough. So putting Zeus to 1 is the only issue I have with this card. If it's at 1, I don't have to see it more than once a game, unless your opponent can somehow recycle it. At which, if they're recycling a Zeus, you've probably already lost anyway. So that's my only issue with Zeus. Now to Dragoon. I don't have much to say about Dragoon. I think this card exploits one of the biggest problems I have with Link summoning, is that it's the most generic mechanic. And now that any deck that can put 2 monsters on the board can get this asshole on the field, it's just, I'm not a fan of it. However, I don't think Dragoon needs to be banned just yet. I do think it's a card that should find its way to the ban list at some point. Either that or Verte Anaconda. I don't like generic cards ending up anywhere. However, I think Dragoon himself is fine in the current format. Limit him to 1. That's all I'd like to see. Just because he has no reasons being at numbers higher than 1. That's all. It's not something that necessarily has to happen, but he doesn't need to be banned yet either. I don't think decks that are playing Dragoon are any good, just because Dragoon himself is usually a sign of giving a deck that has low combo potential or low pressure potential a boss monster to like interact with your opponent. That's kind of how I see this card. So, all right, now to dragons. I put it off long enough, right? Dragons are, I think dragons are fundamentally the best deck in the format. While it's true King of All Calamities really hoses this deck, the board that dragons defaulted to deal with calamities, I believe it's like Dragon Maid Tiding. As the Dragon Maid player, I'm well aware that like our cards are ending up in Dragon Link. I'm indifferent to that. I don't like the idea of a Dragon Link deck, and today I want to abolish it. I think Guard Dragon Elpy, I'm going to say it right now. I think Guard Dragon Elpy is a perfectly balanced card. I think there's nothing wrong with having the ability to special summon from your deck after committing, at the very least, you have to commit 4 cards to your board, right? Because if you have World Legacy Guard Dragon, then you commit 3. You need 2 arrows pointing down left, down right, and then you need you need Elpy to either be in between those 2 arrows, or you need Pisty on the other side. Like, it requires setup, and your opponent has ample time to interact with it. The proof in the pudding, there are so many dragon decks that abuse this card. All of them have seen no real, genuine competitive success. Dragon Maid is one of them, for example. Dragoonity is another one. Blue Eyes, Red Eyes. These are all dragon decks. Odd Eyes could use this card. Draco Slayer and Pendulum could use this card. Elpy is not a fundamentally unfair card. The people that are saying that just want to hit dragons, but they don't know how to hit it, so they just want to kill it. The problem with hitting Elpy is that you're not killing Dragon Link, not even close. You are killing the dragon decks that rely on this resource, right? It's the same argument for Heavy Metaphor's Electromite. It limits the ceiling of dragon decks by really reducing what you can print that's okay for dragons. But it is the only thing keeping dragon decks relevant, right? Dragon Link's problem isn't that it has access to Guard Dragon Elpy. I don't think Guard Dragon Elpy is a problem. I don't think Guard Dragon Elpy should be banned. It's fine. The problem with Dragon Link is that it has very low commitment cards. A lot of them. The biggest offender of low commitment extenders and starters are these 2 right here. These 2 cards should not exist. So let's begin. Tracer Rocket. I think this card it's probably too harsh of a hit to Rocket specifically. So I don't think it should be hit, but it could take a hit, right? Like I could feasibly see Rocket Tracer going to 1 just because opening this card is incredibly powerful. It's a negate in its own right, right? And in decks like Rocket Eldritch, like Rocket Tracer is really like the starter from hell. It gets you another dragon, which gets you the magical dragon synchro, magical. Yeah, Chaos Ruler. That's his name. This guy, which searches you a lighter dark, or not searches, excavate a lighter dark, and then mills 4, which is insane for a lot of decks. So I don't think Rocket Tracer is completely absolved of responsibility for the degeneracy that Dragon Link is capable of, but I think it's the lowest. It's the last thing I would hit on, like, out of all of these cards right here, not counting these three. These three are for a separate discussion, but of these cards up till Chaos Base, this is the most fair card here. So, White Dragon Wyvern Burster. And I'm going to lump this in with Chaos Base. I'm just going to talk about both of them. So the main problem Dragon Link has is that it has these two cards right here. You could, in theory, right? If White Dragon Wyvern Burster were at 3, they would play this card at 3 and maybe 1 or 2 of the other one, right? Because this is the one that matters. You need to be able to banish a dark monster. The black one needs to be able to banish a light monster, but Dragon Link is a predominantly dark deck. So a lot of their plays require them to have this card. This card was limited to 1, just like the other one. Even though Black Dragon could be at 3, it doesn't really matter. This is the one that matters, right? This card effectively puts this card at 3, at 4, and then gives you a free +1 for it for no reason. I can't really think of why Konami printed Chaos Base and allowed it to specifically search these two. I felt like somewhere in this card's wording it should have just said a level 8 of a light or dark monster that's different from the one that you sent for this card's cost. Like, specifically level 8, just so that this synergy wouldn't exist, right? Because even down to the point we could justify a limit to Chaos Base, right? Completely justify it just because of White Dragon and Wyvern Burster existing, and the loop that it can, not the loop, but the advantage that it generates with the other Black Dragon. They were limited to 1 because of that. Why did we put them at 4? And then why did we allow this card to have a draw for some strange reason that, for all intents and purposes, resets the advantage engine that these two generate? It didn't really make a lot of sense to me. No other Chaos deck really matters too. It's not even like Chaos Base's limiting this card would hurt some Chaos deck that doesn't exist. If this card is being played, it's to search this, like 9 times out of 10, or the other one, depending on like how light or dark heavy the deck is. So realistically speaking, you could ban this card or limit this one. I think one of them should happen. Personally, I would sooner see this card banned so that this card could exist for the actual Chaos strategies that it was for, not just to be the craziest starter for Dragon decks that it is. So personally, I would like to see a White Dragon Wyvern Burster ban, and a Chaos Base limit. World Legacy Guard Dragon is the best extender in Dragon Link. It lets you cheat by, instead of requiring the normal 4 dragons for a full Dragon Link combo, it requires 3, which is incredibly strong because it lets you keep that extra body. I could conceivably see this card go to 1 for that, just to weaken the extenders, but I don't think that's the hit Dragon Link needs, since they could do whatever they want without ever seeing this card. I just thought I'd put it here because it technically is an incredibly strong enabler for Guard Dragon Elpy. I think Elpy's a fair card relative to what everything else Yu-Gi-Oh is doing. Crystron Halcyon Firebex, for example, you could make the argument that this card should be banned, right? But until they're banning this card, I think Elpy is also fine. It's the same thing with Isold, right? All Warrior Turbo decks, pretty much any Warrior deck that's not Hero, uses this card and abuses what it can do, and those decks are like fine, right? Like Infernoble Knight really isn't that big a deal. It's a really strong deck. Isold is perfectly fine in that deck. Um, so if Isold's fine there, I don't see this card needing hit. And Electromite, like I'll talk about it a little bit more later. But between these two and their comparison with like Elpy, and I guess Guard Dragon is tangentially related to this conversation. They could, if they're allowed to stay, I think Elpy should just stay. Um, so for Dragons, quick launch, right? One of the biggest problems with Elpy is that he just has some of the best extenders enabling him, or starters and extenders enabling him. So a limit to quick launch to reduce that, make Tracer harder to see, no free summons, make the deck more committal to its normal summon. So like a solemn judgment on the normal summon of the Dragon Link player will actually matter. Something like that, or like bouncing it back to their hand before they can link summon it off and then like banish, or like for a red MD, like make the deck more normal summon reliant, put an inherent choke point, and I think dragons are fine. I think Dragon Link won't rise up to be the best deck. It's a fine deck. Like Buster Lock was really the worst thing that deck ever did, and its extenders and its starters are really much the best thing, pretty much the best thing it's doing now. So if we just get rid of quick launch and either Chaos Base and the White Dragon by reducing the deck's consistency, it'll be a fair deck. Another thing that we can do that I think would be incredibly powerful would be to limit Striker Dragon. This card has a lot of recursion potential for that deck that not a lot of people really know about. Obviously, it searches boot sector launch, but it's more so you can target one face-up monster you control and one rocket monster in your graveyard, destroy that monster on the field, and if you do, add the other monster from your graveyard to your hand. Using this card with Rocket Recharger lets you add back Red MD. So I could see this card get limited just so that the deck becomes a lot more of the glass cannon that it really was supposed to be. But now that it kind of got out of hand, and these are all things I would like to see, just because the Dragoonity support is coming out, and like Chaos Base is so strong that the Dragoonity support would probably be overlooked. And like it's not fair that like certain Dragon decks can't use Chaos Base. Dragon Maids can't really use it too well. Dragoonity also can't use it very well. Pendulum struggle using it. The Pendulum Dragon deck. So I think just removing the chaos aspects of Dragon Link and quick launch will allow the deck to just be more fair. So let's just do that. This was just a hypothetical like additional act that they can do, but I don't think it's required. Striker Dragon's not the most unfair card, but it's something that could help to weaken the deck without removing Elpy. Red MD, I think this card could go to 3. The only deck that would probably play it at a number higher than 1 is what? Dragon Maid? Like actually just us? Because this card has interesting implications just being a big dragon. But even then, like Black Metal Dragon is effectively this card. So if you see that card, you see this card. But yeah, like there's really no reason for this to be at 1 now that it has its hard once per turn. So Tempest, I don't know. This card could go to 3, and no one would ever even play 3. Like what? I don't even think Dragoonity would play 3. And this would be like Stratos for that deck. So, I mean, I guess they probably with Gold Sarcophagus, you could make the argument that the two of these cards are really strong together. But for like what deck, right? Like Dragon Maid, we would like that, but I mean, I don't know. I don't think Tempest needs to be limited anymore. To be honest, I think Tempest and Blaster could go to 3 like right now, like tomorrow. Redox, I'd probably leave at 1, but he doesn't need to be banned in either of this title. Dragon Rulers aren't that great anymore. Decks just aren't as it's not as free, and like the most broken things that deck was doing was generating advantage for Super Rejuvenation, but with Dragon decks nowadays, with cards like Elpy existing, Super Rejuvenation is just too slow. You want little dragons that do a lot, and like Dragon Rulers, like the baby rulers, don't really do that much without playing into the big guys. and the big guys just aren't as impressive these days. If anything, I think Tempest is the best one of all of them here, just because he searches Parlor if he's banished off of Gordsark, whereas like Parlor and Remus, Dragoonity Remus, whereas these guys don't really search anything that great. So like a Papa card, why is this at 1? I mean 0. Why is this banned? This discard a fire card in itself, Papa card. Okay, sure. This I could potentially see causing problems. Redox, but it's like in one deck, and that's like Adamancipator, and that's like if they draw it. And Adamancipator has so much gas that I don't even think they'd even play this card, because it's like it's the type of card that if you can't guarantee you see it, then you don't care about it. So Redox at 1 would be fine. Like even I don't even think Dragon Rulers would. I mean, Dragon Link would even play any of these cards if they were all at 1. I mean, they don't even play Tempest anymore, and they used to. But yeah. Tidal. I mean, Water I guess could use this card, but Water's not even doing that much, and like, and I think Water has like all the starters and extenders that they need. I don't think Tidal would be too broken. I guess they could play it because it's an extra body and it's a foolish, but it's this card could also probably just come back. I don't think it'd be a problem. Goldsark, I think as long as Thunder Dragon Colossus is banned, which I would prefer to stay banned, I think this card can go to 3. I don't really see any legitimate reason for it to be at 1. It's not really doing anything anywhere. I don't think any relevant deck is playing it. So, and I think if it went to 3, I still don't think any deck would be playing it at 3 anyways, save for maybe Dragoonity, Dragon Maid sort of deck, banishing Tempest. So Thunder would play it, but like again, Colossus is the only good thing that deck did, and without it, they don't care. Last and not least, I want to talk about Electromite. So a lot of what I said about Elpy, Halkifibrax, and Isold really extends to this card. I don't think Electromite is inherently broken to where it should be banned because it's too good for the game, but like those cards, and I agree that all those cards should be banned, the reason I think Electromite should stay banned alongside banning those cards is because what it means for the deck that it supports. Electromite is more so than any of those other cards. This card existing, even at 1, warps the entire pendulum mechanic around it. Electromite existing means that any and every single pendulum deck will be playing the cards that tutor it out. It will be the first thing they do, and recycling it as much as they can will be the only thing that matters to them. It completely dominated that mechanic, and Jerome McHale at one of the remote duel invitationals pretty much said as much, that it was not banned because it was so much better than any of the other options in the format. It was banned because it just pendulum decks only did the same thing, and it was just make it. So from that design's perspective, if they're going to continue pushing this idea that if it warps the mechanic or the type that it's for, it should be banned, then Isold should be banned, Elpy should be banned, Halkifibrax should be banned, all those cards should be banned. I'm for that. But if those cards are allowed to exist, there's no reason why this shouldn't exist. This doesn't do that much more for Pendulum than those cards do for their types, right? Pendulum doesn't become the best deck ever overnight because this card's at 1. It didn't happen when it was at 1. Pendulums were irrelevant then, and they'll be irrelevant after it goes to 1. So it's really a matter of preference, right? Are we trying to diversify what Pendulum decks are doing? If so, keep it banned, as well as justifiably ban Isold, Elpy, and Halkifibrax, so that Warrior, Dragons, and Tuner decks, and I wouldn't really say Synchro decks, because like Halkifibrax is more for a Link tool than it really is as a Synchro tool. Ban all of them, but if it's just banned for some sort of like I said, I don't think this card needs to be banned anymore. Even if I would like it to be banned. I'm sorry if that sounds a little bit hypocritical. It's just I don't like what this does for the pendulum mechanic. But if they're not going to do anything about it, right? If it, like reading those Doremi chord cards, I'm like, man, this could be at 3 in that deck, and it'd be fine. It'd still be trash, and it's like, holy fuck. Electromite, like, really, it almost felt like that deck was designed around having Electromite as something that as a card in the deck. So, yeah, I would like to see that. I would like to see this card return for that reason only. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think there are any other cards on the Forbidden and Limited list I want to talk about, anything I want to come back. Cards I think could also come to 1. I think Performer Power Monkey Board can return. A lot of people cry 1 card scale, but I mean, 1 card scale literally doesn't mean shit. Like, if Electromite stays banned, this card could easily come back to 1. Skullcrobat Joker could go to 3 overnight. Orcist Harpore, I'd prefer this card to stay banned. Sorry for the folk that think Orcist deserves something. I don't think that deck needs anything. Everything else here seems fine. I prefer they return this card and ban the Lyrilisk, Independent Nightingale. If they bring back Electromite, just to give Pendulum the extra like power. But it's like, it is what it is. I think Colossus should stay banned. So why? Because it's a mistake on legs that can protect itself. That's why. Yeah, everything else here. I think Mirage Stallion could go to 1. Who cares? Firewall's going to come back. It's not even up for debate. I would like them to ban Orcust Night. If they ban Orcust Nightmare, Harp can go to 3 and put Mermaid to 1. I'd take that. I'd like to experiment with Nightmare Mermaid and the Nightmares as like a strategy. I feel like co-linking is dead as a mechanic, which is a shame because I think it's a unique mechanic. The biggest problem it had was floodgating your opponent out, but now it can't do that anymore. Well, it can, but not so easily. Like if your deck requires like a link monster to be somewhere, then the co-linking still sort of matters, but it really doesn't. I think Nightmare Mermaid should return to 1. If it does, I could see Harp Horror coming back, but I think Orcust Nightmare should be banned in its place. So just to stop all of that those shenanigans from happening again. Any of the spells and trap, no, all these could stay banned. I mean, if they want to throw toss format a bone, engage could go to 1. I don't think 1 engage matters. Sky Striker's still kind of a little weak. So, but personally, I don't want anything from that format coming back. Just leave it all banned for a little while longer. Limited, like I said, Red MD to 3. Pank should stay at 1. This card should never really be at 3 again. It does a little too much. It applies pressure. It beats over things, and it can break a board by itself damn near. It technically tends to require 2 unique forms of interaction for it, or it just pops the board, and it should never be at 3. It's a little too strong. I don't know why this card's at 1. I don't play Infernity, but I think it could come back. Let's get one down. This card isn't at 1, it's at 3. So I don't even know why it's here. So the Speedroid engine has... I'd kind of like to see the Speedroid engine come back. I'd like to see the Speedroid engine come back. Terratop to 3. I don't know. At the end of the day, it'd probably just become a vehicle for Dragoon and Link plays, which is unfortunate. That's the reality of it. Oh, this why is this card on, why is this still on the ban list? What the fuck is this card doing? Like, bring this card back. Hyper Librarian. could technically be higher than 1, but I feel like if you're ever summoning more than 1, then you're doing something unfair, so leave it at 1. Um, Bardiche ended up being fine. I don't think it's too busted. Right now, anyway. 1 for 1. Yep. Everything else here. I mean, I guess you can put this card 3. Master Plan is banned, so this card could go to 3. Trickstar Light Stage should be at 3. All these trap cards should stay at 1. Not a single one should move to a number higher than where they at. Let's see. Semi-limited list. Mally, stay at 2 forever. Just leave it there. This could go to 3. Who cares? Okay. Alright. That's pretty much my ban list discussion video. Decided to talk about a few cards here and there. Definitely rambled on a lot more than I probably should have. But I just had a lot to say about like dragons and like optimizing them. Because again, I don't think going for the jugular. We don't always have to be so heavy-handed with our balancing. If we wanted to deal with dragon decks and like punish Elpy, just bring back Max C. Trust me, nobody's gonna be playing dragons if that happens. So, like, I prefer to take a scalpel to the issue, and like, True King of all calamities, even at 1 would still be a problem, so it has to be banned. Ban 10 at 1 would be less of an issue, so I think it could go to 1. You know. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Sorry it was a long one. Hopefully you guys stick out to the end and like, comment, subscribe, leave your own suggestions or your own opinions, and I will see you guys in the next one. By the way, I should just say, I've been busy with school and work, so that's why the content on the channel has been pretty slow. But I also feel like once the new ban list comes out, I'll just be more like ready to post content. That's kind of what's been holding me back, between the format just being like go second and die to this guy, or get your whole board sent to the graveyard, or like somebody sneezes 2 monsters on the field and this asshole shows up, or like this, like, yeah, I just got kind of like burnt out on Yu-Gi-Oh for a little bit, so I took a break, focused on myself a little bit. But I'm gonna try and get back into the game. I was a little bit more focused on some Dragon Maid stuff. I have a lot to talk about regarding a few cards. This card right here, Dragoon Remus, probably my favorite card of the year, alongside Gay Dirg. This is another card I want to explore a little bit more in Dragon Maid. I feel like this card in our deck is like insanely powerful, but this is an early build. Like this is something I haven't quite put to paper just yet, so I wouldn't really worry too much about ultra polymerization. But the theory around it may show up sooner or later. Anyways, this video's dragged on long enough, so you guys have a good evening.